There's a plane in the sky that carries no bombs, no soldiers, no cargo, and no supplies. But what it does carry is far more dangerous than any weapon on the battlefield. Because if this plane goes up, it means Washington is preparing for the one scenario nobody wants to say out loud. The United States Navy calls it the E-6B Mercury. Flight tracking analysts who monitor military aircraft around the world call it something else. They call it the Doomsday plane. And since February 28th, the day this war began, multiple E-6B Mercury aircraft have been tracked taking flight. That alone would be enough to raise questions. But what happened next made those questions impossible to ignore. On March 2nd, 2 separate E-6Bs were observed in the air at the same time. One departed the Gulf Coast and headed toward Naval Air Station Patuxent River in Maryland. Another lifted off from Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. In the days that followed, military aviation analysts documented additional E-6B launches. Some tracked toward the Atlantic, some toward Europe, some toward the Persian Gulf. The Pentagon declined to comment on the flights. Its official response cited operational security, and that silence only deepened the mystery, because this is not a normal aircraft doing a normal job. Here is what the E-6B Mercury actually does, in plain language, without the jargon. Every nuclear weapon in America's arsenal requires a direct command before it can be launched. The missiles in underground silos, the warheads on submarines, the bombs on long-range bombers. All of them need a command from the President or the Secretary of Defense. That command travels through a chain of communication. Ground-based command centers, satellites, secure radio networks, underground facilities. But that entire chain has one weakness. It is physical, it can be destroyed, it can be disabled. And if an adversary hits enough of those nodes, conventional or nuclear, the chain breaks. America loses the ability to give the order. The E-6B exists to prevent exactly that scenario. It is a flying command center built on a modified Boeing 707 airframe. It carries a crew of 22. It can fly roughly 7,000 miles. It can remain airborne for nearly 3 days with aerial refueling. It is hardened against electromagnetic pulse attacks, and it carries a 5-mile-long trailing antenna. That antenna can transmit very low-frequency signals directly to nuclear submarines operating deep below the ocean surface. Submarines that cannot be reached by conventional radio. Its mission designation is TACAMO, take charge and move out. Translation: even if every ground command center is destroyed in a first strike, this aircraft keeps flying, it keeps communicating, it keeps the nuclear chain of command alive. And from this plane, orders to launch intercontinental ballistic missiles can still be transmitted. Missiles that can travel 10,000 kilometers. Missiles carrying warheads far more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. That is what makes this aircraft different from everything else in the American arsenal. It does not fight the war. It makes sure the last possible order can still be given if the war reaches its final stage. Military analysts are careful to point out that E-6B flights do happen during training drills and routine readiness exercises. The aircraft must fly regularly to maintain operational capability. So an uptick in E-6B activity does not automatically mean a nuclear strike is being planned. The Pentagon itself has gone out of its way to avoid any suggestion of nuclear escalation. But here's the part that makes these flights impossible to brush off. They began on the exact day the war started. They have continued with documented regularity across 10 days of conflict. And they are happening at the exact moment Iranian missiles are striking American military bases across the Gulf. At the exact moment, Russia has confirmed it is sharing intelligence with Iran about U.S. troop positions. At the exact moment, China is reportedly supplying drone components to Iran. And at the exact moment, American war planners, by their own internal admission to journalists, have no clear endgame, no defined victory condition, no exit strategy. The Doomsday plane does not fly because everything is going fine. And that is where this story stops being just about one aircraft, because now the mystery expands from a plane in the sky to a war with no clean way out. The United States has fought wars across the Middle East for 25 years, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Yemen. Through all of those conflicts, wars that cost trillions of dollars and thousands of American lives, the E-6B Mercury either stayed on the ground or flew routine patterns over the continental United States. It never needed to move toward an active theater of combat. It is moving now, and that change matters. The Daily Mail's tracking report put it plainly. Fears of a potential nuclear conflict are intensifying following the ongoing war in Iran. Not fears of defeat, not fears of economic pain, fears of nuclear conflict. That is a different category of concern altogether. That belongs to a different chapter of history than any war America has fought since 1945. The last time America used a nuclear weapon in combat, it leveled 2 Japanese cities and killed more than 200,000 people. That was 80 years ago. The E-6B Mercury was built because the world decided those weapons could never be used without an absolutely certain and unbroken command chain, all the way from the president to the launch button. And now the plane that protects that chain is flying toward the region where America's war is being fought. Think about what that means. Because the nuclear dimension of this war is no longer just theoretical. It is hovering in the background of every conventional failure, and the conventional options are beginning to run out. Here's the military map of America's position as of day 10. The United States entered this war with the largest military buildup in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. 2 aircraft carrier strike groups, B-2 stealth bombers, F-35s, some of the most advanced air defense systems on Earth, bases across a dozen countries in the region, and the combined targeting intelligence of the CIA and Mossad, built over decades of operations inside Iran. On paper, this looked overwhelming. 10 days in, here is what has changed. Qatar, which hosts Al Udeid Air Base, the largest American air base in the entire Middle East, has formally declared that its territory, airspace, land, and sea will not be used for offensive military action against Iran. The UAE made the same declaration. Both countries stated this policy clearly and publicly. Understand what that means operationally. America is fighting a war from bases in countries that have told America not to use those bases to fight the war offensively. The soldiers are there. The aircraft are there. The command infrastructure is there. But the host governments have drawn a line. Defend our territory? Yes. Launch offensive strikes against Iran from our soil? No. That is not a small diplomatic complication. That is a major strategic constraint. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham publicly called on Arab states to join the offensive and strike Iran directly. Qatar declined. Kuwait declined. Saudi Arabia declined. The UAE declined. Not quietly, publicly. The Gulf Cooperation Council, the six-nation alliance America has spent decades building as its core regional security structure, is collectively refusing to become a co-combatant. And across every Gulf capital, the message has been the same. This is not our war. That is where the next layer of danger comes in. Because while America's regional partners are stepping back, America's rivals are stepping in. China is quietly accelerating its own involvement. Multiple American media outlets, citing U.S. intelligence officials, reported this week that China has been supplying drone components to Iran. The U.S. Navy is present across the region, in the Persian Gulf, in the Red Sea, in the Arabian Sea, in the Mediterranean. And according to those same reports, the Navy is watching the Chinese supply routes and cannot stop them. Has chosen not to, cannot. Because stopping them would risk opening a second confrontation with the world's second largest economy and second largest military. And America cannot manage that front while already locked in this one. Russia, meanwhile, confirmed weeks ago that it is providing Iran with intelligence on the locations of American troops across the region. That intelligence is being used to target U.S. personnel with growing precision. 7 American soldiers are confirmed dead. Dozens more have been wounded. Iran has struck American bases in Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia repeatedly, consistently, and with increasing accuracy. Then comes the next escalation point. Yemen. The Houthi movement, which had suspended its Red Sea campaign since October 2025, declared this week through its leadership that its forces remain fully ready, finger on the trigger, waiting for the signal. If the Houthis re-enter the conflict and resume targeting commercial shipping in the Red Sea and the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, the fallback route global trade has been counting on disappears. The route around the Arabian Peninsula, the route through the Red Sea to the Suez Canal, gone. And if that happens, while Iran keeps pressure on the Strait of Hormuz from the north, then the global energy map changes overnight. Hormuz effectively blocked from one side, the Red Sea effectively blocked from the other. And suddenly, every barrel of Gulf oil, every cubic meter of LNG, and every container ship moving between the world's largest manufacturing economy and its biggest consumer markets has nowhere safe to go. That is when this war stops being a regional crisis. That is when it becomes a global economic shock. And that is why the world is watching this so closely. This is not abstract. These are the stated capabilities of actors who are already mobilized, already armed, and already being fed intelligence and components from major powers. Iran's IRGC has publicly stated it can sustain this war for 6 months. Some of its commanders have gone further, saying their strategic reserves, missile stockpiles, and operational capacity allow for an even longer engagement than American planners expected. The White House originally talked about weeks, then 3 to 6 months. The IRGC is saying they are ready for longer than that, and every extra day increases the cost. America has reportedly spent hundreds of millions of dollars per day so far. Stretch that to 100 days and the number explodes. Stretch it to 6 months, and the bill becomes politically toxic, almost entirely unbudgeted. And every day that price compounds. Gas prices rise at home, markets sink further, investor confidence weakens, and the domestic political cost grows heavier for an administration that sold itself on economic competence. That is the corner America is standing in. And when a country standing in that corner deploys the Doomsday plane, people notice. Now let's be very precise about the nuclear question, because precision matters more here than anywhere else. Is America about to use nuclear weapons against Iran? The honest answer from most credible military analysts speaking publicly this week is almost certainly not. Iran does not have the kind of strategic nuclear capability that would normally trigger the deployment of America's nuclear command architecture. The E-6B Mercury was designed for scenarios involving peer nuclear adversaries, Russia, China, adversaries capable of destroying American command infrastructure. Iran does not have ICBMs that can reach the continental United States. Iran does not have thermonuclear warheads. So why is the Doomsday plane flying? There are two serious answers to that question, and neither one is reassuring. The first answer is deterrent signaling. When a country deploys visible elements of its nuclear command structure, it sends a message to everyone watching, to allies, to adversaries, to neutral states. The message is simple. Escalation will be met with escalation. It is a way of saying, we still control the situation and you should think carefully about what comes next. The E-6B flights may be America's way of warning Iran, Russia, and China that the nuclear option has not been removed from the strategic background, even if it is still far from the front of the line. The second answer is darker. It comes from the classified briefing room reality described by officials who told journalists the administration has no endgame, no real rationale, and no plan for the aftermath. It comes from the idea that this strategy is no longer controlled escalation. It is improvisation under pressure. It is decision-making while surprised, diplomatically isolated, economically squeezed, and running out of a conventional leverage. And when a leadership in that position deploys its nuclear command aircraft, even for deterrence, the signal it sends is not confidence. It is desperation. And the rest of the world reads desperation very differently. China is not stopping its drone component shipments. Russia is not stopping its intelligence sharing with Iran. Qatar, the UAE, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia are not joining the offensive. Britain did not send an aircraft carrier. Its official policy remains defensive only. Its prime minister explicitly refused the use of British bases as launch pads for strikes on Iran. France moved its aircraft carrier toward the Mediterranean, but offered only limited support. Every ally America might have expected to rally is instead calculating its own interests and stepping back. Iran's IRGC, meanwhile, has been built, funded, and hardened over decades for exactly this kind of confrontation. That is why the old assumptions are collapsing. American planners assumed Iran might break under sustained bombardment the way smaller adversaries once did. But Iran is not Iraq in 2003. It is not Libya. It is not even North Korea in isolation. Iran has Russian intelligence, Chinese components, decades of institutional preparation, and a leadership that believes survival depends on escalation, not retreat. The math of this conflict was always likely to end in one of three ways. The first ending is internal collapse inside Iran. New leadership emerges. America declares victory. Some intelligence assessments said this was possible. Most independent analysts said it was highly unlikely. Day 10 suggests those analysts were closer to reality. The second ending is limited American success. Iran's nuclear program is degraded. Missile capability is reduced. America declares victory on narrower terms. Regime change is dropped. That is the face-saving option. But it depends on Iran deciding to stop firing. And Iran's leadership has said publicly that any ceasefire must be permanent and guaranteed, not a tactical pause. America's position is unconditional surrender. The distance between those two positions has not narrowed in 10 days. It has widened. Which brings us to the third ending. The war expands. More countries enter. More fronts open. Economic damage moves from painful to destabilizing. The Strait of Hormuz stays disrupted beyond the point where emergency reserves can cover the gap. The Houthis reopen the Red Sea front. Oil spikes past levels the global economy can comfortably absorb. Markets slide into sustained bear territory. And somewhere in that chain of escalation, a decision gets considered that looked unthinkable when this started. The Doomsday plane flies for exactly that reason. Not because that decision has already been made, but because the people running this war want to preserve the ability to make it from the air, even if ground command infrastructure is destroyed first. That aircraft has a crew of 22. It carries no bombs. It carries no missiles. It carries no troops. What it carries is authority, the authority to keep the nuclear chain of command alive when everything else is burning. And it is in the air right now over a war that began 10 days ago with no exit strategy, no defined victory condition, and no serious plan for what happens when the bombing stops. So the real question is no longer why this plane exists. The real question is why a plane built for the end of the world suddenly has reason to be visible over this war now. Because the Doomsday plane does not fly for conflicts that are under control. If you want more real geopolitical breakdowns like this, where we go beyond the headlines and uncover what's really happening, then subscribe now and turn on the bell.